So welcome everybody. We're pleased today to have TREC on with us for a little brainstorming session. Thank you to Christine Anderson for reaching out to me with this opportunity. And so we're really excited to have Chelsea and Scott on today. As we said previously, if you have questions you want to ask, but you don't want to unmute and ask them out loud, you can message them. You can do it to everybody, or you can do it just to me. You can do it just to Christine. And we will ask those out loud for you. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do a short presentation, and then we'll kind of open it up for some questions and brainstorming. But first I want to introduce Chelsea Buchholz. She is the Executive Director for the Texas Real Estate Commission, and she will take it from here.
Awesome. Fantastic. So thanks for letting us join you today. There's three of us on from TREC. I want to introduce Christine Anderson, who handles all of our communications. She's also juggling the first day of school today, so there may be a child that pops up over her shoulder. Don't mind that. That's just the season that we're in. And then also Scott Kessner, the chairman of our board, and probably the most he's the one I speak to the most often of my 9 bosses. He's like the big boss of mine. So Scott, do you want to start us off, and then I'll take it back and you and I can bounce it back and forth?
You bet. First of all, thank you for scheduling this. Chelsea will cover some of this later. We should be in person a lot of places, and with the lockdown, we've been doing a lot of virtual meetings, and this is really, we've got a short presentation. We do want to hear from you as far as the direction TREC is going. I see a lot of familiar faces. I've seen y'all through the Realtor Association. I was chairman of that in 2015 and have served on a lot of committees with y'all. And I know some of you, I see Sarah Norman, have also served at the TREC level with ESAC. The governor appointed me to the commission, and 8 days later, appointed me chairman of the commission, and it's been really fast and furious since then. I think we've made some changes and improved on some stuff, but we really want to know the direction we're going, what we're doing right, and what the future is. And we were very fortunate. Doug O. Mixon had hired Chelsea Buchholz as general counsel, and we put out the job search for a new executive director, and there was nobody that was more qualified than Chelsea Buchholz sitting there as general counsel. So she moved up to executive director and has done a phenomenal job leading the agency through this period. And I'm going to let her kind of start on the slides, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Awesome. Okay. A few things I want to say just before we jump to slides. First is that I'm new to the real estate world, but I'm learning as fast as I can. So I appreciate learning from all of you, and as I learn, there's a lot of folks at TREC who I am surrounded with who are filling in the blanks for me places. But I'm delighted to meet all of you virtually. We want to do this again when we're in person. So just look for us after post-COVID. We're going to be on your doorstep sometime soon, just to say hello. I've been in this shop since January 1, and then of course COVID hit in March. So I've literally just done no traveling to get out to visit with folks, but I'm itching to do so. A few little announcements before we get to kind of where we're headed as an agency. We currently are seeking some appointments for the ESAC committee, Education Standards Advisory Committee, and we're looking for applications between now and September 21st. So we have 2 more weeks, I think, a little less. Information about that is on our website. So if that's something that may be of interest to you, then go to our website. And if you have any trouble getting to it, then just send me an email. My email's at the bottom, at the last slide of this presentation. So you'll have it. You can also expect a lot of information in the coming months over the new requirement to have 3 hours of contracts included in your continuing education. We didn't up the hours, so the commission didn't up the hours from 18 to 21, though that was discussed. We're keeping it at 18, but you will have that requirement for 3 hours of contracts. That goes into effect on February 1st. And by October 1st, by next month, we'll have some tools on our website that will allow you to search for courses that would satisfy that contract's requirement, and that will also kind of flag your license history to see if you've already taken something that would have satisfied that. So more to come on that, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. We also are working very hard with a broker responsibility working group who are meeting this fall, really in the summer and fall, to provide some recommendations to the commission on changes to education and experience requirements, potential license portability, kind of changes to licensing requirements in a lot of different ways. So I wanted you to just be aware of that. You can tune in to those meetings. The next one's tomorrow afternoon. You can do so through clicking on our website. We've got all of the upcoming meetings listed on our website. So that's what's kind of going on at TREC. We want to hear from you primarily today. We won't have all the answers. We'll do our best to answer any questions you have, but it's important to the commission that as they make decisions on how to move forward, that we hear from license holders and that we support your work. So the goal for today is simply just to hear from you and to get your feedback. I also wanted to spend a minute on our mission statement. We have a long mission statement. I'm not going to read it all to you. That's the next slide, Christine. But the bottom line is that our mission is to balance consumer protection with regulation that supports continued economic growth and, of course, an ever-changing marketplace. So we have that tension between consumer protection and economic growth, and that's the world that we operate in. It's very important to me that we have a strong, healthy relationship with local boards and with Texas Realtors and with NAR, and to remain very communicative and in lockstep in that relationship. But I'll say that our missions are very similar, but they're not exactly the same. So there may be some instances in which we don't perfectly agree, and that's okay. That's not a big deal. In the midst of any disagreement, it's my mission to just remain to remain healthy in that relationship, and for it to be over a subject matter and not to be anything personal.
Hey, Chelsea, I did want to just make sure everyone in the group knows that on the group chat, I shared links to all the things that you were just talking about, including the meeting information. So if people are looking for that information, they can find it in the group chat.
Good. Okay. I'm so glad. Next slide. Then we've talked about mission expectations for today. We're going to walk through a few potential initiatives that the commission has. Some that would require law change, some rule change. Excuse me, some would just be operational changes. So we're going to walk you through that, and this is almost like a little bit of a test case. We want to hear from you on what you think of those things. What do you like? What do you dislike? What have we missed? Our ears are open. Some questions I'd like answered, and if you have a question or a different comment, make it. But I want you to know that what's important for us to hear from you is, what are you excited about? And what do you think may have some opposition from what we showed you on the slides? And then how can we support your work? And are we acting as an impediment? I didn't say that right. And if so, how? We want to be an entity that is a support to you. And what do you wish we knew that we don't seem to know? And have we asked the right questions? So that's the mission of the day. Next, we have a few slides that show strategic initiatives that require legislation. I'm going to pass that to you, Scott.
Okay, thanks. You know, TREC, a lot of the things we do are legislatively. They're handed down by the legislature in their statute, okay? At the same time, as a regulatory commission, we are not able to lobby for specific changes. That's why it's important we do have a relationship with the Texas Realtors, with TLTA, and stuff like that. one of the things in our mission statement was economic, development, economic stability and support. The governor sent a list of every agency wanting to make sure we limited the barriers for getting in the business. Okay, that was not necessarily sent to the real estate commission. It was sent to all agencies. One of the things we're seeing a lot of communications, a lot of input on, a lot of concerns is license portability. And that's someone with a license maybe in Georgia or New Mexico that moves into here, and the broker responsibility working group is kind of looking at that. I mean, right now you need 180 hours to get your license. You need 98 hours to renew it. You need 900 hours for broker's license. So many points in the last 4 years, active for 4 years with points. Does that number of hours need to be decreased? Should experience count for some of the hours? If you've been a licensed broker or property manager for 30 years, should that count towards some of your hours? So that's some of the stuff we're looking at that will require some legislation. And I had a conversation with someone on the broker responsibility group working group earlier, and they're like, there's no way you should ever limit the hours. And then some on there are saying, well, yes, you should. And that's what's really good about this group is they bring input from all avenues. Okay. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Some of the things we're looking at is, the use of drones by agents, the regulations for inspectors, appraisers, we like the ability to maybe run the fingerprints prior to applying for a license and taking all the classes. How does the agency respond to natural disasters? I know whether it's a hurricane, whether it's the fires we had in Central Texas, in your area several years ago, whether it's COVID, or we went back and we delayed renewing the licenses for March, April, May, June, and July. What flexibility will the legislature give the agency to make decisions like that? Okay. Maybe adding statutory language for right-of-way, insurance requirements. I'm sorry, next slide. Christine, sorry about that. Stuff like that. The inspectors have a recovery fund. That recovery fund, Chelsea, correct me if I'm wrong, has never been used. Do we still need a recovery fund for inspectors when it's not used? Regulations on right-of-way agents. A number that I thought was really kind of interesting. If you're at the board of directors meeting last whatever day it was, Wednesday or Thursday, TREC is supervising 208,000 licensees. We just went over 200,000 real estate licensees, salespersons and brokers, first time ever over 200,000. So, we're always looking for better ways to do that with less regulation, but still at the same time protecting the public. Okay. Next slide. How many of y'all are sponsoring agents and now see where the website where you can sponsor an agent I always smile when I say this, terminate an agent online. It's immediate. You don't have to send the license in. You can sponsor them, terminate them. Not only is it online, but there's also no cost. We're exploring the elimination of check processing. I mentioned this in February at the realtors meeting, and I thought I was going to be run out on a rail. We still process $250,000 worth of checks a month. That to me is just a phenomenal amount. Someone said, when are y'all going to be able to Venmo and PayPal? Stuff like that. Our processing time to do a license, once the application is received and all the paperwork's done, it's down to just under 7 days. For people applying for a license, you can now get on there and you can check your status. Have the classes been submitted? Have the fingerprints been submitted? Have you had your permission to take the test? All that is now trackable on our website. Our hold time has been under 1 minute. Very, very proud of that. Last month, it tweaked over a minute. And I think that's because we had almost 15,000 licenses due to renew in July. So if you had a license that was supposed to renew in March, April, May, June, or July, everything was pushed to July 31st. So needless to say, we had a very crazy July. I think phone calls were up 30%, emails were up almost 40%. I will tell you something you really need to pay attention to. If you had an agent that renewed in March or April or May or June, their license was initially posted as expiring July 31st of 2022. Along with that, they received an email saying it would be backdated to their original renewal date, okay? So if you were supposed to renew in March, you renewed in July, you do not get 4 months of freebie, okay? You will go back and renew in March of 22. And again, that's just to keep us from having to renew 15,000 licenses 1 month. So our hold time's still around 1:40. Emails, 98.5 are returned in 1 day. 99.95% are returned within 2 days. So, we're really trying to stay on top of the customer service. There's emerging business models that we have to watch. A lot of questions on LLCs, a lot of questions on internet buying, internet buyers and companies that buy houses. All those are new business models emerging. Next slide. We need to we need to simplify, rulemaking. When the advertising policy came out several years ago, there was a lot of questions. We need to make rules easier to understand for our shareholders. Okay, Chelsea, I'll let you take over.
Okay. On the rulemaking thing, our thought is some of these rules are very hard to understand. And if they're too hard, I'm a lawyer, I have a hard time understanding them. I'm thinking that others might have a hard time understanding them too, and then it's hard to comply with them. So we will have an initiative to just simplify so that they're easy to understand. Okay, so you've seen this slide before. What do you think? What's exciting? What do you hate? How can we support your work in ways beyond what has just been mentioned? Are we acting as an impediment? How? What do you want us to know? Next slide. I think. What questions do you have? And Christine, click to the next slide because I just want folks to have time with our email addresses so that if you do have any questions that you want to talk about offline or if you need anything from us, you have those. If you just have a question about how a rule applies or something like that, I'll probably do more harm than good for you. But so we've included Scott's email, my email, and then also this general counsel at trec.texas.gov. That's a good place to just post really legal questions. We can't be legal advisors, but we can help you navigate. What questions do you have for us? What response do you have in terms of how we should move forward in a way that would support what you do?
Amy, do you have any questions already from your members? Or I have a couple of things that I know we've had some regular comments on.
Yeah, I do have a question that came in anonymously. The question is really kind of connected to, how does TREC support a salesperson licensee when it comes to either the misdeeds or unscrupulous behavior of their broker? Because sometimes those situations do arise. And I guess we would like some guidance or some thoughts as to how TREC either already has things in place or some things that they could consider to help agents who may have a situation with a broker that's not doing things legally or doing a good job for the agents either.
That's a great question. I was wondering what kind of questions we would get anonymously. This is the first session we've done where that's been an option, and it's a good one. There might be more bravery with anonymous questions, right? I have a few thoughts on that. One is that we are an enforcement agency. We are licensing and we are enforcement. So we must enforce the rules and law within our jurisdiction. The way that we do that is through complaints, and those complaints cannot be anonymous. And I know that that puts you in a precarious situation, but I would encourage you that if there is a complaint that needs to be made, that you make it, because that's the only way that we can affect change in the industry I think it takes great bravery and some calculation on your part, but I would encourage you to do that. And then I have just one more thought that's not so much an answer to your question as much as just sort of a comment that seems to apply everywhere, and that is a sales agent needs to be careful who they align themselves with. That broker sales agent relationship is incredibly important, and I think that's a decision that a sales agent needs to make about who they're working with, and in the same way that you would kind of apply for any type of job, right? You don't want to align yourself with someone who's violating the law. That it's not going to reflect well on you. But that's just me talking. Scott, what additions do you have?
Yeah, and I don't know why.
I think we lost you for just a second. We didn't catch any of that.
Okay, the complaint cannot be anonymous, even though the legislature would like us to try to keep it as anonymous as possible. One thing that I think would be a great tool for the brokers is to also look at discipline on the agent. And I'm hoping within the next few years with our new database, the broker will be able to run a history on the agent and see what kind of complaints they've had and vice versa. Unfortunately, a lot of it still goes back to, it needs to be broker to broker. We had a situation less than a month ago where I emailed the broker and said, hey, we're having trouble with this. Will you step in? And the broker emailed me back and said, I'm sorry, but that's my agent's client, not mine. And I emailed back and said, I'm sorry, I thought all clients belonged to the broker, and happened to put my little title at the bottom of the email and got a response really quick, okay? And so sometimes, it's got to be broker to broker, but we hear your frustration, we really do. And I think we're doing more and more with Legal 1 and Legal 2 to get examples out there and broker responsibility, what broker responsibility is supposed to be.
Sarah.
Yeah, I think Scott and Chelsea, I think really more of that question is not so much broker to broker issues, is the broker and I realize agents should check what brokers they're going to go to work for, but sometimes when you go to work for a broker, everything seems to be kosher, and the next thing you know, the broker's doing things more against the agents versus the general public or broker to broker situations. And it seems like a lot of what TREC has been designed for is to make sure the broker does what they're supposed to do with the outside consumer, as well as taking care of their agent as far as making sure the agent's doing the right thing. But when they wrong the agents, that's where sometimes I think it comes into play, and it's hard to figure out where as an agent that could go to get some help. Does that make sense? About the wrongdoing.
Yeah, and you're right that the focus at TREC is consumer protection, right? Not the protection of one license holder against another. That's a great point. I think that's something we need to look into. Putting on my lawyer hat, that's kind of a make sure you have, as a sales agent, your agreement with your broker is in writing, and some of that would probably be dealt with in private litigation. But I think examining what TREC can do to support the sales agent that's a great question. We need to think about that.
I agree. I think that's a really neat thing when I teach broker responsibility and we have agents taking the class just for hours. They really don't know what the content is. And we have a lot of oh me and amen, parts where they go, oh me, my broker's not doing that. And so, yeah, I think it's all education, but I made a note of that. That's a very interesting approach and question and concern.
Thank you so much. So I have another question that's come in anonymously to me. So the question is, if there's a consumer issue, does the consumer have to go through civil action before TREC will pursue issues with the given broker or agent?
If it's a consumer issue, does it have to go through litigation before we'll get involved?
Are they talking about like a complaint, or are they talking about filing with the recovery fund?
It seems to be something that would be more financial based or legal based than just a basic complaint.
The complaint, no, but if it goes to legal fund, Chelsea, cover me if I'm wrong, there has to be some type of judgment against the agent for the transaction before legal fund, but they can file a complaint without going through any type of
You hit it. You hit the nail on the head, Scott. You cut out. I'm filling in where I think you were continuing. File a complaint anytime. The complaint process can run concurrent to litigation. In some instances, we might press pause until litigation is complete, but that's very rare. The only time when the recovery fund is really the place where we need a final judgment before the commission can act to pay that judgment, where it's not paid in other ways. If a defendant is has a judgment against them and they can't pay it, then a victim could come to the commission and say, please pay this claim out of the recovery fund. There's a lot of stipulations as to when we can do that, if that fund is available for those victims. But that's the only instance in which we would, or the only regular occurrence really, where we would need to hold off on any action on our part for litigation to occur.
And Chelsea, again, for the crew that's watching this, I did post, we have a pretty good article explaining the recovery fund, the requirements for it, and everything like that, and I posted that in this group chat as well.
Awesome.
So I've got something else. A question came through that was, and I think this is probably going to be complaint based. I mean, it's kind of all rooted in that. But we have an issue sometimes, and all markets have it, with out of town or absentee brokers. Individuals, when they're contacted by either another agent within our marketplace or a broker within our marketplace, have no idea what's going on, nor do they even know who the person you're referencing is sometimes. Give some tips maybe of how to work through those situations, because I mean, I've had that experience where I will call someone's broker and say, we have this situation, and they have no idea who the person I'm talking about is. They have to actually go look it up. So talk through a little bit kind of what tips you'd ask on or have, offer to them on that.
Scott, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, let me take it. And if I lose again, I'm going to go to another computer.
Okay.
There can be out-of-town brokers that still have supervision, okay? It's the ones that are out of town that don't have the supervision. I always encourage our agents, when you get a contract, look at the broker, look at the supervisor, look at the agent, look at everything, make sure all the licenses are intact, okay? The first sign of trouble, they usually contact me and I try to reach out to the broker. One thing that I will suggest you do, there are limited service brokerages, and there's that form that you can present to the client saying your broker should do this, this, this. I think one of the really great things TREC did prior to me getting there was establish geographical competency, okay? And I think a lot of times you can use that phrase with the broker and or the agent, and that helps. But unfortunately, it is a complaint-driven process. And if they're not supervising, they're not competent, a complaint needs to be filed.
Nothing else to add.
Well, and we do, if I get individuals who call here, I will first say, have you had a broker-to-broker conversation? Okay, if the person's a broker, a lot of the behaviors, as you had referenced before, behaviors will not change unless someone files a complaint. And our industry is very complaint driven, and that's a big part of it. People who don't want to file a code of ethics complaint, they don't want to file a complaint with TREC, but in order for us to be able to proceed forward and have a successful industry, we need case study. We need these things to come to light so that they can be remedied. And so that's, that's something that we always kind of try to push, but sometimes it's sensitive situations that are tough and people don't want to file and they're afraid of working with the person down the road. And it's, it can be a difficult decision to make sometimes.
I see Missy.
We had, I was going to say we had a comment from Missy in the group chat.
And, the story I tell is one of the very first houses I sold was in an area we call East Ridge. And my broker said, well, did you tell them about Christmas? And I was like, no, it's March. How would they be worried about Christmas? And he says, it's going to take them 45 minutes to an hour to get home at Christmas due to the Christmas lights. That's geographical competency. It's not knowing just the MLS. It's knowing the neighborhood. And the only way we can enforce it is with complaints. The only way. And I think we'll do with Legal 1, Legal 2, broker responsibility. I think you'll see more definitions and more explaining exactly what it is that it's not the MLS. And I think TREC's done a good job with the Legal 1, Legal 2, talking about specific case studies. I think that makes people pay attention.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. We get our case studies from actual cases, and our cases are a result of complaints. And so, geographic competency is those words are new in our rules, but we've always had negligence in our rules, and it's pretty much the same. It's just specific to geography, right? But we do not get very many complaints related to that issue. But it's not because it's not happening. I think our recent conversations about just the fact that you're hearing a lot about geographic competency hopefully means that the industry is thinking about that more, and it's kind of top of mind. And so I encourage you, if you have something that would be a complaint, file that. That ends up being the way in which we teach and coach the industry well beyond just the enforcement of that case, but that then becomes what's discussed in Legal 1 and 2. So it has long tentacles that's very helpful and it allows the industry to improve and to be as good as we can be. I did want to, if there's nothing more on that topic, I'm sure that there's more questions. We typically mention, and neither Scott nor I did, there are big changes happening to our forms, our promulgated forms, contract forms, and we are currently in a comment period for those form changes. So I wanted, I want you to know of that, and I want you to pay attention to what those form changes are. It changes the way that you could potentially pay the option fee, makes changes to leases. What else am I missing? There's another big change.
Option fee and leases are the big ones.
Yeah. Okay. So if I'll tell you that these forms were published to the register one cycle ago, and due to comments that were made by license holders and others, the commission pulled those potential forms down, reconsidered, and published a new round with changes to them. And so we're currently in that comment period for you to review and to tell the commission what you think. And then those will go back to the broker lawyer committee for consideration, and then potential adoption in November to be implemented at the first quarter of next calendar year. But only if the commission is satisfied after seeing what the comments are.
We had a question about the average complaint, and I hate to use average, but I'll give you some numbers. 78% of all the complaints are handled 0 to 6 months, 20% 6 to 12, and about 1% over 12 months. I will tell you, it is not unusual, citing a specific one where a complaint was received, it was sent out within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and the plaintiff had 2 weeks to get a response. So on the average under 6 months, I'm going to say a lot of them are probably, of that 78%, there's probably a good deal of them, Chelsea, don't you think, probably under a couple months?
Absolutely. And it really just depends on complexity of the case, what it takes to investigate, and then where it ends up. Our 1% that's not handled in a year, that's typically because it needs to be scheduled for State Office of Administrative Hearings, which is kind of the administrative version of trial. And that just takes time. But if absent going to SOA, that's what we call that, those are handled almost always within a year, more typically 6 months.
I just pulled up the monthly report we get from TREC, and the 5th largest complaint, almost 7%, is on broker supervision. So there are some complaints coming in on broker supervision. Okay.
So a question connected to the complaint process: is there any part of the process that's done online? Is there any way to more fully kind of automate that process so that it can go a little bit quicker and so that it doesn't feel cumbersome on the front end?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. And we are in the process of doing that. That is on our list of future dream items. Now, I'll say that's right now you download a form and you fill it out, and we'd like for that to be like a fillable form on our website. And Christine, you may be able to speak a little bit more to this. That won't necessarily, that'll make it easier on someone who's filing a complaint to just plug in the information. That won't necessarily speed up our process, hardly at all. Other than we won't process that piece of mail that gets sent in or emailed in, right? We'll just handle it a little bit differently. But we're working hard to increase automation on our website, and that's a top one. Did I mess anything up, Christine? Okay.
No, you did great.
What else, y'all?
I know that we've had some questions going back to your comment and mention of the contracts course being added to the CE. I shared the article that's on our website, kind of specifying a little bit more detail about that addition. But one thing that we've gotten a lot of questions about is, when do I have to take that course? Do I need to take it to renew my license this time or next time? And so I think maybe if you can speak to, when does that course not only become effective, but who needs to take the course and when?
Sure, and this is an interesting one. So if you renew before February 1st, our rules that do not require 3 hours of contracts apply. So if you're within your renewal period before February 1st, you don't have to take it. If you renew February 1st or beyond, we will look for that contracts class. So it doesn't go by your renewal date, it goes by February 1st, before or after February 1st, regardless of renewal date. So those people who are in that window of renewal, 90-day window, right? 60-day window, 90 days.
90's right.
You won't have to take the contracts course if you renew before February 1st. You won't have to take 3 hours of contracts until your next renewal cycle. But if you wait until February 2nd, then the 3 hours of contracts will be required.
And Chelsea mentioned this earlier. The licensing and education department's really working with providers that if they have a 3-hour contract class now, they can get it fast-tracked for approval. You do not have to submit through the full approval process. So if you have a contracts class at your local provider that is for contracts, it can be approved. The 3 hours is not promulgated. It can be done, per market. Like less than 4% of any of our sales involve a homeowners association. So we probably don't need 2 hours on homeowners association. If you're in San Antonio, you probably need 2 hours of homeowners association. You know, we don't have a lot of hurricanes in El Paso. Maybe if you're in the Galveston area, you need more information on the wind and intercoastal waterway addendums. So, you know, we're making it very flexible for the market to get the
Well, one thing that was interesting when I was working with the team on some of the additions to the website was the concept that you can take a 1 hour contract course maybe from one place and then a 2 hour. It doesn't need to just be a 3 hour course. Again, speaking to your flexibility there, Scott.
Exactly.
And that contracts class can also be farm and ranch. It doesn't really matter what it pertains to on your audience. Is that correct? Is that what we decided?
That's exactly right. Whatever applies to your area of expertise, so that it's not worthless time, right?
Right. So if I'm a broker right now, I'm sorry, Scott. If I'm a broker right now, of the 18 hours, I am mandated by 17. Broker responsibility, 2 legal 1, legal 2, and now the contract. So that leaves 1 hour of whatever I would like to take. Is that correct? Is that how we still stand? And if you're just an agent.
Minimum requirements, yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
Okay.
something really annoying. You can take as many hours as you want.
Well, sure. And hopefully they will. They do, right? Is there any thought or has it been run through? I know on ESAC we kind of touched a little bit on it, but not got into detail of making broker responsibility, because it's right now it's not mandated by agents. But yet I think it is such a eye-opener for most agents to understand what their brokers should be doing, what to anticipate through that process. And so do you think at any point we'll see that where it is going to be mandated by everybody, not just the broker? Because I think that would also help a little more, as Legal 1 and 2 does, as far as geographical areas and the broker understanding and the agent understanding.
We haven't seen that, but that doesn't say it won't happen. But, you know, brokers are certainly allowed to make that part of their expectations in independent contractor agreements.
Right.
Certainly. Oh, something I want to talk about real quick. If you're a broker and you appoint someone as a supervisor, you should really probably let them know they've been appointed as a supervisor. Twice we've had husband and wives appoint each other as a supervisor and not tell the other person, and they went to renew their license, did not have broker responsibility, and later their license was inactivated because they didn't have it. I just think it's a really good idea. If you make your wife a supervisor, you should probably let them know, okay?
Just to preserve the marriage, right?
It happens.
So another question that's education related. So, I mean, from an association standpoint, one of the bigger questions we get is, how much education do I need? And so we point them to the, you know, we look at their record and we say, well, you've got X, Y, Z. But what we run into sometimes is if they're trying to decipher it themselves, they will have their time frame. They know it's supposed to be 2 years, or sometimes they can't even remember how long it's supposed to be. And when they look at their education record, there's no indicator of which cycle is current of education. So sometimes you fall into like a wonky thing because you're looking at your record and you've got your education pulled up, but you can't tell, you know, what would be considered current renewal and what was previous renewal.
Yeah, how do I start my 18-hour count? Kind of.
Yeah.
Well, I can demo that for you.
I would agree with that. And then I would also add too, for agents that aspire to get their broker's license, if there was a simple format on that education tab that said like, you're this much away or this is where you are, then that would be really helpful for everybody to not have to make a ton of phone calls or track down certain things. They can just gather all that information and present it at once.
I love that. That's a great idea. We'll mark that down. It's kind of something to improve upon on our website. It may not happen tomorrow, but we'll put that on our wish list.
Well,
some of our challenges are around our licensing database that we utilize is really close to end of life. We're in the process of replacing it, and it talks to our website a lot in ways that I don't really fully understand. But the two are very much connected, right? And so over the next 2 fiscal years, we will replace that database. And with that will come improved functionality on some of those items. But it looks like Christine is sharing her screen and may have something helpful to say to you.
So one of the features that was added after the website was redesigned was the ability, because we heard so many times during our tours in the past of, I can't figure out where the line in the sand is of what courses count for what. And just a little background for your members, we have, because you can late renew, it's pretty hard for us to figure out what course goes for what year, because somebody that's after their expiration date could actually be taking courses for their last renewal period. One of the big things we launched was this view renewal education information. So now when you are, currently it's only for people that are within their renewal period, they're 90 days before. I understand most people are saying we want it to be able to be all the time, but right now our line in the sand, our tool is available. Once you get into your 90 days of renewal, you have this button that'll appear. And how do you get there? You access it through our license holder search. You look yourself up. So Sarah Norman could put in her name, and then it would come up when you're within the 90 days, and you come here and you see view renewal education information. When you click on that, this page will take you to a tool that our IT team developed in-house, because as Chelsea spoke to, our database has a hard time deciphering that. So our team developed this outside of our database so that you guys could find the information you needed on one simple page. So now we do have, you know, continuing education completed, not completed. This is your expiration date. These are the courses that you need to have. So nope, this is not done. The legal 1 and 2 is not done. They need to take all of their continuing education courses, and it also shows you how to where to find all of that information. So as those courses are added, a list would appear here of all the courses that count for your renewal, and then how many hours you have and have left. So it does calculate it for you now, as long as you're within that 90 days.
So
Have you heard? Oh, sorry, Amy, go ahead.
That's okay. Go, Rachel.
I was just going to say, like, for example, when we make our education schedule for the association, some of those classes are offered much more in advance to our windows. And so that's the issue. I would think this is great. And this is my first time seeing this, but I would think that would be a recurring issue for multiple marketplaces, as we, you know, for those of us that need to take a certain this or that, you know, we have to fit it into our calendars when the association offers it, especially like this year they were done for free and things like that.
Yeah, no, and I agree. It's literally the next project that we're kind of actually already working on in pieces is being able to make this available for all license holders at all times. But the way that our database works, because of that late renewal feature, it makes it very hard for the database to be able to identify which courses count for what. So for right now, the line in the sand that we had to do was this: if you're within the renewal period, our database can recognize it. And if you're not, then it's harder for us to do so. And we can still do the old school way that Amy was mentioning before.
We'll get there, Rachel.
We really will, and it's definitely at the top priority for the team. But right now, you can still do the 90 days at least. It's much bigger and better than it was before.
Now, like they said earlier, all your hours still show up on your other screen. This is just the 90 days. It breaks it down what's counted for this renewal. So if you go back to your original license and click on it, it'll show all your hours you've taken. Okay. This is really great for the broker when I pull up, see who's expiring the next 90 days, what classes we might need to offer as a brokerage or as an association to get people in. And it's very accurate. I mean, it's posted almost immediately. Very impressed with it as a broker.
So I have 2 questions. So one of them would be, when you have an independent broker that works for a brokerage, their business address is supposed to match what the brokerage's business address is. Is there another way that TREC could also connect the dots together, so when you pull up an independent broker, there's more of an indicator as to which brokerage they are connected to. Because we do have brokerages where there may be 8 or 10 broker associates, but they're not the broker of the firm. But sometimes it's hard to connect them to kind of where they're supposed to live. And we have the national database to go off of through NAR, but it's not always 100%. And associations, we don't all do stuff the same way, no matter how hard we try. And so I guess the question would be, besides the mailing address or besides the business address, is there another way that TREC could look at kind of connecting those dots together?
Chelsea, I can help you with that if you want.
That's great, because I'm thinking surely there is. I have no idea.
So, Amy, that's a great request and something that I think I've already written it down for us to look into further. One of the issues that we have is that the only relationships that TREC has in our database is a broker or a sales agent, and you're either a sales agent under one broker, but we don't have those individual business agreement arrangements where we have a broker working for a broker. I know that sometimes like an individual broker will work for another brokerage and they have a business arrangement, but it has nothing to do with their license, right? So we as an agency cannot easily track those business arrangements outside of somebody's license. So that's always kind of been our big hurdle, is how do we come up with any data to associate somebody with? Maybe there's an additional form that you can fill out to tell us like, hey, disclose this business relationship so that it's easier. But again, that would be a question for your members. Is that something that they want to disclose to us? Because then it becomes public information and it's on the website and we have to maintain it and, you know, those kinds of things. It's just it's actually a question for y'all.
And it's one that we will explore and kind of put on our list of, I think part of that is kind of our licensing database. And when we have a new database, will it have the intelligence to sort of draw some of those organizational lines? Christine, you make a great point. Do you want us to have that information? It probably would be very helpful in some instances. So the balance of, is it more helpful than harmful, or vice versa?
Yeah.
Good question to explore.
I already have written it down for the future.
And then my last question is just driven off of a call I got last week from an agent, and I know the answer because I've gone through this with a member at my old association. When someone is arrested for an action, I'm going to use the broker in my old association, was charged with intoxication manslaughter. His license stayed completely 100% active, no restrictions whatsoever as a broker until he was fully sentenced and found guilty in the whole thing. I guess my thought would be, or my pondering would be, when those types of situations come up, we have had one in particular locally that was connected to a child. But the license remains active, so that individual can still go into houses and show property and stuff like that. Is there not some way for TREC to be able to, I don't know, do something provisionally with the license while they're going through that? I understand you want someone to be found guilty before you take any action. But in a lot of those situations, it causes a lot of turmoil within the marketplace because there are clients who are very concerned. If someone comes to do an appraisal on a property and they've got this looming over their head, they don't want that person in their house. It becomes like a very sensitive situation depending upon what it is. And I've received the question a few times, and my response is kind of always what I know, is that there's nothing that can be done with the license until they're all the way through the process, but that could be years depending upon what it is.
Yeah, so a few things. Very generic lawyer hat, someone's innocent until proven guilty, right? So we have to operate within that constitutional right. However, we are also changing the way that we are notified of criminal offenses. Historically, that information is provided to us by license holders they're obligated to report it within a time of that conviction, or within the renewal process, but it's delayed. We have just transitioned to a system that is the RATBAC system that allows us to get real-time information from the FBI for criminal offenses. And so we will have that information available to us much more quickly. So if there was an instance of true life and safety, we would at least have that information. But still, we have to operate within one's constitutional rights. So there's a tension there. Now, this is just, again, my kind of generic lawyer hat. If there's an instance in which someone is arrested for something that is so egregious or significant that they're in jail, then they won't be practicing, right? The whole bond thing. But that's all I have on that, really. But I can tell you that we'll have that information much more quickly, and we will not rely upon it being reported to us by a license holder. That will be reported to us by the FBI.
Chelsea, is there a way that our enforcement division can expedite the suspension of a license or anything like that?
Yeah.
Probably 12 years ago, Sarah, you might remember this. They made it to where you could do a temporary suspension.
That's right.
If it was, and I think in the last 10 to 12 years, it's probably only been done once or twice. And it involved a huge property manager in the Houston area, and they wanted him to stop doing business. Now, the association certainly have some control, but I have not seen that temporary suspension of a license in probably 8 or 9 years. But on something like that, I mean, again, the complaint would have to be filed. But there is a provision, I'm going to say maybe even 15 years ago, where they could temporarily suspend if it was a direct impact to the consumer and the public. And again, that's probably something more for the enforcement division to dig into, but we'll make a note of it.
Yeah, it's a great question. What else? I really appreciate the questions. I am going to use this in the future to submit them anonymously. That way everyone feels real comfortable to ask questions. I like it. I'm going to start submitting anonymous questions to y'all. Just kidding.
I like that too. That's good. That's good. Hey, I do have a quick question or thought, not really a question as much. So, I know, Scott, you said right now we're at 180 hours for somebody to get their license, for someone to be able to get their license. And we're talking about, should that be decreased? And then how do we handle when people come in from other states and blah, blah, blah. I get that. And I know that I hear it all the time in education and teaching, that people will say, well, I was in California for 5 or 10 years or 20 years, and now I had to come over here and redo everything. And, I just think Texas is we have always kind of stood out and above because we do have strong education. I don't think we are to go down on that. I don't think we are to let that go. And if you've been in Texas for 30 years and you've had a license, but you really haven't practiced a lot, I think you're going to have to figure out a way. If you say, well, you've been in property management, but you've really never managed anything, you've just done 1 or 2 over the last 15 years, how does that look? And so, I am a strong advocate of enforcement. I even push to go to the 21 hours because I think the more we can educate, the better off we all are. And so, I don't know. I just think we really need to look strong and hard at that before we start thinking about stuff. Texas, there's a lot of states don't even have promulgated forms. God bless us, right?
Sarah, you make a good point, and your point is one that a lot of people share, and one that's important to the commission. I think that that's one side of our tension, and the other side of the tension is really the governor saying, are you removing all barriers necessary for folks to enter the workforce in Texas? And And then kind of along those same lines, which, I mean, he is very strong about, you know, are you making it too hard on people? And along those same lines, would education do the trick, or is it something else? You know, sometimes we throw education at something and it doesn't really do what we want it to do. Okay, well, how else do we do that? Is it through enforcement? Is it through, you know, requiring a higher standard of brokers? I mean, I'm not suggesting that that's across the board the case, but what is it that's going to fulfill our goal? But ESAC is talking a lot about that, and the commission is talking a lot about that. Broker responsibility as well.
That's why there's going to be a lot of conversations about that. Truly think it's going to, because I mean, you know, I took an 8-hour 1031 exchange class in New Mexico. Should that count in Texas? Possibly. You know, took a lead-based paint class in New Mexico. Should it, you know, so there's a lot of digging to do in that. I totally agree, Sarah. You know, that we've always been separate, but yeah. That's why we have those good groups looking at it.
You're just special. That Texas.
I don't have any more questions that have come in. So.
And we're right at that hour mark, and we want to be cognizant of everyone's time.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for your time.
I'll apologize for the internet. I guess that's what happens when you're an hour behind everybody. So.
Thank
Given
y'all.
your weird time zone, Scott. Such a weird.
Amy, thanks. All right, I'm out.
We really appreciate it, and shout out to my leadership who's on, Rachel and Kathy, my MLS folks, Jody and Greg that was on, and thank you Amber for being on my staff, and Missy King who's our Texas Realtors Director and past president. So we thank y'all, and we appreciate your time and giving us the opportunity to talk with you, and not a lot of people in the state, not a lot of licensees get that opportunity, so greatly appreciate it.
Well, likewise, y'all don't be a stranger. You reach out if you need anything.
Thanks.
Y'all have a great
Bye-bye.
afternoon. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Christine. Bye. Chelsea. Bye.